Oregon football's path to the Pac-12 championship game looks a little different than it used to thanks to the conference's new rule. How different could the schedule look year by year going forward? We'll discuss that today. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view if you're watching on YouTube every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every weekday. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show right now. 5-star reviews, hop in the YouTube comments, get active on the show, send me a question on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. You can also tweet with the hashtag AskLODPod. Get a question answered right here on the show, which we've been doing this week and will continue doing this week. But first, we start with the future of Oregon football scheduling. Now, I'm always fascinated by schedules, and they factor in rather heavily to how successful a team can actually be in 2022. For those of you who don't know, I also host the Locked On Pac-12 show here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And one thing I was talking about recently are potential dark horse teams to, win the Pac-12 championship. And one thing that I was examining there when I'm thinking about, okay, which team could, be competitive, have a good roster. UCLA is one. I do think Oregon State is one, maybe Arizona State. The only reason I really have ASU in there is because of their schedule. Your schedule matters a great deal because remember, if you have 9 conference games, some teams are going to play 5 conference road games and some teams are going to play 4 conference road games. Obviously, the teams that have only 4 conference road games have a significant advantage. That is no more true for any team than Oregon. I don't know if I said that correctly, but that's okay. You understand what I'm getting at here because Oregon's record at Autzen has been among the best home field advantages, I don't know, last decade plus. I mean, it has been really, really elite. And so that's why I think this scheduling is such a fascinating thing to look at. So for those of you who are not watching yesterday or listening yesterday, just a brief rundown. The Pac-12 announced that the importance of divisions is no more in the conference, right? They pushed to get rid of the regulation at the national level from the NCAA, so conferences can now decide whether or not to have divisions factor into how you decide who will play in your conference championship game, or you can just go off the base, go based off of the highest winning percentage in league play, which is what the Pac-12 and a lot of other leagues are going to do, which I think is the right move to get the 2 best teams in the championship game. Would have helped Oregon a couple years. I think it was 2012 and 2000 and I forgot what the other one was, but Oregon would have been in the Pac-12 championship game. That Chip Kelly Marcus year with Ertz was out. Yeah, that team would have been in the conference championship game. And had there been a college football playoff, might have been in it. But anyway, we can't change that now. So looking at scheduling here is, I think, fascinating because if you're going to make a rule, as they have, that is going to be implemented as of this year, that is making divisions obsolete in terms of their importance, the logical next step is to get rid of them altogether. The reason that they're currently staying in place, I would imagine, is because they allow for some semblance of consistency and rhythm when it comes to scheduling, and teams have an idea of who they're going to play in which year and which 2 teams in the conference you're not going to play in a given year or maybe over a couple of years. So there's some things we don't know, but let's start with the things that we as Duck fans should want going forward. Now, some of you may disagree with this, but this is just kind of where I'm at when I think about Oregon getting back to the college football playoff. You have to be willing to go toe-to-toe with the best. You have got to be able to go and play in Auburn at a neutral site or play in LSU at a neutral site. I think it's good for your program to do that in a non-conference sense, but it's true when you're looking at Pac-12 opponents as well. I'm just about that smoke. I think if you're going to get to a college football playoff level as a team and as an organization and you're going to win a national championship, you've got to be able to. You think Alabama's ever been scared of anybody? You think Georgia's scared of anybody? No, doesn't matter. That's the sort of attitude I think you have to approach it with. So one thing I think we should want going forward, even though it might bite Oregon bite them in the butt sometimes, is I want USC every year. I do. I really do. Those are game day caliber games once Lincoln Riley gets them up to a top 20 and ultimately I think top 10, maybe even top 5 level each year in college football. I think those are big time games for Oregon. You get the fans rowdy and rocking early morning at Autzen. And I mean, think of the biggest wins for Oregon over the past 10, 15 years in the regular season. How many of them came when game day was there? Right? Those are the sorts of matchups you want. Obviously, you want to be able to win them. You want to in 2010 beat Stanford. What was it, 52-31 at Autzen, or the next year 53-30 down in Palo Alto at the Cardinal Stadium. As a Pac-12 fan writ large, it's the best move for the conference because you want to be able to have matchups as often as possible that you can put on national TV games. And we should want that as a program as well, because you want to get as much exposure as you can and put the best product on the field and be playing in prime time, because that's when more people are watching, get more eyeballs to it, more attention to the program. Everybody should want that. And so I, as an Oregon fan, I want to play USC every year. I really do. And if you're worried about that, what I will say is if you can't beat USC every year, you're not going to get to that coveted national championship season that we're all looking for. You're just not. And if you play them every year, you understand where you're going to need to be to get to that level once Lincoln Riley has them where I believe he will get them to, which is probably a top 10 caliber program. I think it'll take a year or two, but I'm pretty confident he's going to be able to get there. Recruiting resources, scheme, he's going to be fine. And I want Oregon to be at their best. I want Oregon to be at their best, and to do that, you have to play the best. Iron sharpens iron and all that sort of stuff. If you can't beat the best team in your conference, or a program that could become the best team in your conference, whether that's USC or whether that's Utah, or maybe if Chip really gets things rolling at UCLA, whoever it is, I want to play them and I want to beat them, because that's the only way that you're going to be at a place as a football team and as a program, pronounced correctly, of course. You're not going to get to the level you want to if you're trying to skirt your way through the Pac-12 of all conferences and saying, like, no, I'd rather miss USC and play Colorado and Arizona. I think you have to be more aspirational than that. As a fan, you have to be willing to say, yeah, I want to play this team. And so I hope we see USC every year. Maybe we won't, right? That's a big time unknown. But when I think about what I would like to see come about with the potential schedule changes on a conference-wide level, I want to see Oregon and USC playing all the time. I really, really do. I'm about that smoke. I want those big games, and I want Oregon to be in them, because I think it's a good look for the school, and it's even better when we come out on top. Some things are likely to stay the same. I'll tell you after I remind you that our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores. Go Mariners. I was at the game earlier tonight. They got a nice little victory. Fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so there are a lot of changes that are likely to come in terms of who Oregon plays every year, but some things are going to stay the same. Okay, Oregon State, Washington, Stanford, I can't see them going anywhere. There's no way, whenever the divisions do go away, I can't see a scenario where Oregon and Oregon State don't play in a season, or where Oregon and Washington don't play in a season. Doesn't mean that every Pac-12 North opponent is going to be a regular on the schedule. I think Stanford will probably fall into that category, but a Cal, a Wazoo, I think you could have some seasons where in the rotation of teams that Oregon doesn't play, depending on how the conference approaches it, we don't have an inclination one way or another about, how they're going to set that sort of stuff up, or whether, it's possible they keep divisions for scheduling purposes just kind of forever and say, well, they don't mean anything in the realm of who's going to play in the conference championship game. But Oregon State, Washington, Stanford, I think those ones are pretty safe. We will see them every year. I would imagine, not sure, right? Because I'm coming at it from, a conference. If I'm Pac-12 commissioner, I want to put my best teams on the same field on Saturdays in the fall as often as I can, because I want to create those big time matchups that create a lot of attention, that create hype, maybe your college game day, or at the very least are nationally televised rather than just being on the Pac-12 network. So I would think Utah is going to be there pretty regularly, and I would put USC there every year as well. But both those teams come from the South, so it's not necessarily a built-in matchup per se. But that's one of the questions that I have going forward about how they're going to determine scheduling is what is their priority going to be? Because the other side of the coin from a commissioner's perspective is if you're trying to get a team back to the college football playoff, do you want a relatively easier conference schedule so that they can have a better record and show that to the committee? Or do you want to have a quality regular season product on any given Saturday where you could, potentially be getting game day or just kind of a lot of eyeballs, or, amongst the fans in the conference that it's going to be a big time game. So I think that's a consideration that we have to look out for. But I think that Oregon and Utah have now met twice in the Pac-12 championship game. People have noticed that the brand of Utah football is certainly growing on a national level. So I would think Utah will be there pretty consistently, but I'm not entirely certain. That's just kind of my prediction there. I mentioned earlier, not every Pac-12 North team is necessarily going to be there. I think the ones that are the most likely for us to miss in a given season are Cal and Wazoo. There's not a lot of storied rivalry between those two schools in Oregon, and there's also just not usually as much buzz. And those are two schools that can kind of get down as programs as well. They're programs. We are programs, of course. But one other thing to consider here for Oregon is with the potential scheduling changes that will take place in the future, could you have any new rivalries develop? Maybe. If you start playing a team every year, like a USC or a Utah that previously you could miss out on every couple of years, I think it makes it hard to develop a rivalry when you don't play every single year and you just play most years. But USC, Utah, I don't think a big rivalry is going to develop with Utah. I have a lot of respect for Utah fans, and they're avid fans. They're very passionate, but they're also really, really nice. And so I just can't feel, even though they trounced us twice last year, I just can't feel like there could be a brewing sense of, discontent between the two fan bases. I don't sense that there. USC, on the other hand, I think that rivalry could become pretty legit. You're going to have recruiting battles between Oregon and USC, the two premier recruiting brands out here on the West Coast. And then if they're, emerging as the top two programs consistently in this new format and going into the next 4 or 5 years, Dan Lanning, defensive coach, Lincoln Riley, offensive coach, I think there's just a lot of storylines that could generate there. So maybe there's some potential for that rivalry to grow a little bit more, or maybe get renewed in that sense, because USC just hasn't been as relevant as they were back in 2010 and 11 when had the Storm LA and game day was there and all that sort of stuff. I know that we don't like USC a ton, but it doesn't feel the same as it used to, right? Because when a big brand like that everybody used to dislike and love to root against is all of a sudden just way down, it's hard to get up the same way as a fan and feel that extra level of intensity, of passion, of dislike for the other side when the stakes are lower. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually kind of excited for USC to become relevant again, because it create more big games. And yeah, it's a potential loss for Oregon that otherwise might have been a more consistent victory, but you're gonna have higher highs and you're gonna have lower lows with USC being really good. I don't think that's all a bad thing. But outside of those schools, we obviously got the Beavs and the Huskies. I think our rivals pretty set. And I just don't sense that much animosity brewing with any other school. I mean, we've had some great games with Stanford over the years, but I don't even sense that there's, a bidding rivalry there. It's just kind of sometimes they get us and sometimes we get them, and hopefully we're able to get them more than they beat us in a stretch of a few years and whatnot. And there have been some fantastic games, right? There have been big games with major implications, but take 2015, for instance. Vernon Adams goes down to Palo Alto. Stanford is 7th. They've only got one loss. They're in the college football playoff hunt. And we go down there and we play spoiler in a year that, once again, I will remind all Duck fans that I am adamant about this. If Vernon Adams doesn't hurt his finger against Eastern Washington and he's not playing hurt against Michigan State and has to miss some time in there, that team goes back to the college football playoff, because Stanford was a playoff caliber team and we went in there and beat them because Vernon Adams was really, really good. And he didn't even know the playbook. He just took the snap, looked to see who was open, and went out there and made a play. Pretty awesome guy to watch, Vernon Adams there. But, when Oregon got that win over Stanford, it didn't feel like a rivalry win. It just felt like an exciting win. It was like, oh, wow, we played spoiler for a good team, and this is a good team, and maybe we'll be able to get to a good bowl game and finish strong down the stretch here in the regular season. I never felt that it was, even given Oregon and Stanford's history of playing some big time college game day games, I just never felt that rivalry was there. So I don't anticipate that developing in a significant way. But I think the way that the scheduling can be done is fascinating. I think it's a great opportunity. I'm glad George Kliavkoff, the commissioner, was the guy leading the charge, because I think this is a great regulation to get rid of and allow conferences to just say, you know what, 2 teams are the best winning percentage. That's what it is. And ultimately, the next logical step at some point, whenever that happens, is you get rid of divisions. And that's why I'm talking about all the scheduling, because divisions determine a lot of how the scheduling is done now. And I think the opportunities are then presented to, be able to have some built-in protected rivalries every year, where Oregon, Utah, USC, UCLA are all playing each other every year. Whereas under the current system, they can miss each other in a given year, right? And that happens pretty regularly because it just rotates around through the teams in the South in terms of who Oregon is not playing in a season. I think this year we missed USC and Arizona State, if I remember correctly, and we get everybody else. So I think that is an exciting opportunity and could be good news for Duck fans. Even if it means the schedule is a little bit tougher, the conference needs to get a little bit tougher to get more respect on the national stage. We're going into a mailbag question next. And this comes from someone who wants a breakdown of Oregon basketball players, and I'm going to grant his wish. 9 Family Bryce hopped into the YouTube comments, which, by the way, another valid way to get a question answered here on the show. I respond to those YouTube comments when it is appropriate to do so. I check them every day. So if you want to hop in there and send me a message or ask a question or whatnot, by all means. But if you want to do it a traditional way, you can DM me at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. You can also tweet with the hashtag AskLODPod. All 4 ways, really, with YouTube comments are valid for getting your question answered here on the show, thoughtfully and thoroughly by yours truly, for all the world to hear. So he hopped into the YouTube comments. 9 Family Bryce did. That's all I've got to go off of when it comes to a name, and asked, hey, can you give a full breakdown of the players that Oregon has coming in for basketball this year? And, the Dior Johnsons, Tyrone Williams, Brennan Rigsby's of the world. So I want to give each one a pretty thorough run through. I don't want to kind of just skim off the top. I think we're going to go pretty in depth. So, I'll do one a day this week and just kind of get through them all for the incoming freshmen and JUCO transfers that we've got. And first up today is Dior Johnson. So Dior is a highly rated 4-star point guard from Southern California Academy, 6'3", 180 pounds. His original verbal commitment was to Syracuse. That was long ago, but he ended up coming to Oregon over the Orange, Bama, and Arizona State. When you watch him play, I think the first thing that stands out to me is something that's not as spectacular, but he has a lot of really good traits. But He's not that phenomenal of an athlete. You think 6'3" point guard, well, maybe he's bamming out. Maybe he's got this really quick twitch or anything. He is pretty twitchy, but I'd say that, he doesn't elevate. He's not going to dunk a lot, right? Like Peyton Pritchard, he's listed as 6'1", but listing Peyton Pritchard at 6'1" is like listing me at 5'10". That's a little generous, and I'm every inch of 5'8.5". Thank you very much, but doesn't have a tremendous level of bounce. But at 6'3", he's got good size for a guard. He's got a really smooth jumper, and though he doesn't have incredible jaw-dropping athleticism, he does elevate really well on his jump shot, and he's got a pretty high release. Unlike Will Richardson, I'm not trying to throw jabs at him. And by the way, just a quick aside, as of now, it's Keyshawn Bartholomew, Jermaine Couisnard, Dior Johnson, and Will Richardson as the 4 guards coming in for Oregon this year. Haven't heard anything about Will Richardson. Monitoring the situation as closely as I can. We'll keep you updated here on the show, which is why you should like and subscribe if you haven't already. But as of now, Will Richardson is back for his 5th year with Oregon basketball. We'll be interested to see how that goes. But Johnson, when he rises to shoot, gets it into a really nice shooting pocket and releases it kind of up closer to his head, and that allows him to work in the mid-range much more easily. He'll post up guards every now and then. He can, hit a fall-away jumper from the block, but he's a real sort of mid-range maestro who can also step out and hit a three-pointer as well. But I think that's one thing that differentiates him from a guy like Will Richardson, who's been just such a phenomenal player, good finisher at the rim, good defender, very willing defender as well. Those are two different things, by the way, but he definitely both. Richardson, a great three-point shooter. I think Richardson's probably a little bit better shooter from beyond the arc, but when you're talking about the well-rounded offensive game, Johnson is a great finisher at the rim. He has a phenomenal handle that he uses exceptionally well when working in the pick and roll, and that's what he uses most prominently, along with that quick twitch, because he's not, incredibly explosive as an athlete. That's how he gets into that mid-range area, creates space for himself, and is able to find shots. But he does that a lot, and he also makes contested finishes at the rim a lot. The sort of moves where gets inside, takes contact from a guy going straight up, and he's fallen to the ground. He's about to hit the ground, and it would be a travel if he hits it, but then he gets it off just in time. He's contorting his body every which way. He loves the long righty scoop layup off the glass as he drives to his left. And one thing you notice, and he doesn't have a ton of highlights doing this, but he does have a couple. And I think just when the way you watch him move and put up shots kind of in the painted area, he's got a really soft touch. And you expect every guard to have that, but I tell you what, he is putting that ball off the glass with a feathery, soft touch. And I think the potential for his float game, which is what I was talking about a moment ago, hasn't shown a ton of it, at least on his highlight reels, but it's real. It is a real potential in terms of his ability to score in the mid-range area and around the basket, because he is just really, really smooth and can just drop the ball like he's dropping it off the backboard almost, rather than shooting it at the backboard. I really like his touch around the rim. And, he's still willing to take contact inside. He's not shying away from it. He's a pretty physical finisher as he gets to the hole, but he just also does a nice job of just gently kissing the ball off the window. Not amazing athleticism. I think it's a touch above Peyton Pritchard, who, dunked a couple times, and it was a big deal every time that he did. But I don't think that's a key element to his game, and that's okay, because guys who are not relying on athleticism are typically very skilled, and Dior Johnson is most definitely that. In his highlight packages, he doesn't show a ton of passing, but a 24/7 scouting report says that he can do it all. And one thing I saw that really put a futuristic image into my mind was him throwing up a lob, and I just had this wonderful vision of him getting into the paint, maybe attacking a 2-3 zone, suck up that middle defender, and then Kello Ware charges in from the baseline and he throws it up to him for a two-handed hammer. And that's something that I think we will see at some point in Oregon basketball's upcoming season, hopefully in the future as well, depending on whether or not Kello Ware is a one and done at Oregon. But that sort of play and others that I think he can make. And by the way, solid 3-point shooter, looks perfectly comfortable, not shy to shoot it. You know, he's got some range, not Peyton Pritchard range, but you know, Pritchard's range also grew during his career at Oregon. But I definitely see some similarities there to Pritchard, a little bit different, but the way that they can both, you know, they put the ball in a similar shooting pocket and they can work in the mid range. They've got great handles, not relying on athleticism. I think there's some good similarities there. And the other thing that he clearly showed in his highlight reels, he plays with some dog. Like this guy is an absolute alpha, and you know he'll bark at guys every now and then, and he'll let you know that he just made a bucket on you, and I like that because that was missing from this Oregon team a season ago, and he's coming into a crowded and somewhat experienced backcourt, so he might be the first guard off the bench, but don't be surprised if you know, let's say Will Richardson doesn't come back, because I don't think he's going to, and you start Bartholomew and Kuznard, don't be surprised if by the end of the year Dior Johnson is sneaking his way into the starting lineup because he shows a lot of really, really good traits, and I'm excited for him in the class of 2022. Nine Family Bryce, thanks for the question. I'll continue breaking down all the guys: Brennan Rigsby, Tyrone Williams, Kello Ware, the newcomers that are the young guys coming in, as Kuznard and Bartholomew both have a little bit more experience in college basketball. But I appreciate everyone listening and making this your first listen. Go make Locked On Pac-12, where I'm hosting your second, covering the Conference of Champions. I appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.